The exclusive terminal of San Francisco International Airport was relatively quiet that Wednesday morning. Richard Blackwell, CEO of Pinnacle Tech Solutions, strode firmly down the VIP corridor, his personal assistant 2 steps behind, carrying a folder of documents. At 48 years old, Richard exuded the unwavering confidence of a man whose software empire for Wall Street was valued in billions. "Have you confirmed my window seat?" he asked without looking back, adjusting the cuffs of his custom-made Italian suit. "Yes, sir. 2A, as always," replied his assistant, accustomed to the meticulous demands of his boss. "I did not see you press the subscribe button on our channel. It will only take you 1 second, so leave your opinion in the comments." Richard detested commercial flights, even in first class, but his meeting in New York was too important to wait for his private jet to return from maintenance. After a priority boarding, he settled into the spacious leather seat, pleased not to see anyone in the seat beside him. Perhaps he was lucky. That hope did not last for long. When the rest of the first-class passengers began boarding, Richard noticed an African-American man approaching with a low-brimmed cap and discreet sportswear. The man checked his ticket and stopped beside Richard. "I think I am 2B, he said with a polite smile. Richard barely lifted his eyes from his tablet. "Are you sure you are in first class?" he asked in a condescending tone that made several heads turn. "Yes, sir," replied the man calmly, stowing a small bag in the overhead compartment. "It looks like they've let anyone into first class today," murmured Richard, loud enough to be heard. "Standards are really falling." A flight attendant quickly approached. "Any problem, gentlemen?" "Just checking to see if my travel companion is in the correct seat," said Richard. "He doesn't match the typical first-class profile." "Mr. Curry is in the correct seat," confirmed the attendant with a tense smile before moving away. The man sat silently, ignoring the remark. 2 passengers in the row behind exchanged surprised glances, and an executive discreetly took out her cell phone. "Did you win that ticket in some sort of lottery?" continued Richard, laughing at his own joke as the plane prepared to take off. Stephen Curry, because it was indeed him, simply smiled courteously and picked up a book on leadership and philanthropy. "No, sir. I'm just traveling to a charitable event in New York." When the drinks were served, Richard made a brusque movement, spilling his whiskey on Curry's arm. "Oops, accidents happen," he said with a superficial apology. It was then that a passenger 2 rows ahead turned around in disbelief. "Man, do you know who you are talking to? This is Stephen Curry, one of the greatest basketball players in history." The blood drained from Richard's face when he finally recognized his seatmate. His eyes roamed across the airplane, noting several smartphones aimed at him, capturing every moment of his public humiliation in front of the NBA star. The following morning, Richard Blackwell awoke in his luxurious hotel suite in Manhattan. Yet the sense of comfort and power that usually accompanied him had disappeared. Instead, a lump in his throat troubled him as he prepared for a day that promised to be disastrous. The phone kept ringing, and the voice of Jennifer Martinez, his director of public relations, echoed nervously from the other end of the line. "Richard, you need to see this. What happened on the plane has spread like wildfire on social media. The hashtag Yuraju Blackwell Humiliates is one of the most talked about topics on Twitter." Every word from Jennifer felt like a punch to Richard's stomach. He turned and looked out the window, observing the frenetic movement of the city that never sleeps. The videos of the incident, captured by the executive who was behind him, had already accumulated millions of views. Celebrities and influencers were posting their reactions, and the general public was expressing indignation at the billionaire's arrogant behavior. Meanwhile, Stephen Curry, the man Richard had belittled, was appearing at charity events, receiving warm applause and being idolized. In an interview, he declared with grace and dignity, "Unfortunately, situations like this happen more frequently than they should. It's not about me. Many people face this kind of treatment daily without cameras to record it." Curry's ability to transform a negative moment into a powerful message only increased his popularity, while Richard was becoming the villain of the story. The technology conference in which he was scheduled to be the keynote speaker sent an email informing him that his participation was cancelled due to concerns over the event's security. The shares of Pinnacle Tech Solutions, which had already been affected by rumors of problems within the company, plummeted by 12% at market open. Richard found himself surrounded by a perfect storm. Important clients began rethinking their contracts, and one of the company's largest investors made it clear that he no longer wanted to associate his name with the firm. The arrogance that had once granted him power was now turning into an unbearable weight. The situation only worsened when he returned to the hotel after a frustrating meeting with the crisis team. A group of journalists awaited him in the lobby, and Richard felt the pressure mounting. With the image of his company in ruins, he could not escape the vicious cycle he had created. What troubled him even more, however, was knowing that his 19-year-old daughter, a social media specialist, was being targeted with jokes and hostility because of his behavior. The phone rang again, and Richard's heart sank upon seeing her name appear on the screen. "Dad, I can't take this anymore. My friends are saying horrible things to me. Why did you do that?" Her voice was choked, and Richard felt a deep pain. I didn't know who he was. It wasn't my intention." He began to justify, but he realized there was no way to defend himself. His words sounded empty and meaningless. He hung up, feeling more isolated than ever. That night, while watching the incessant coverage of the incident on television, Richard saw an image of Stephen Curry speaking about respect and dignity. A commentator accurately summarized the situation. "When you publicly humiliate one of America's most respected and beloved figures, prepare for the consequences." Desperate, Richard turned off the TV. Reality hit him hard. For the first time in his life, his money and influence could not solve his problem. The luxurious walls of his hotel seemed to close in around him, and he began to understand that he needed to face the consequences of his actions. 6 days after the incident on the plane, Richard Blackwell found himself in a place he never imagined: the waiting room of a crisis management firm. The environment was filled with consultants and specialists, all discussing strategies to save his image and that of Pinnacle Tech Solutions. But for Richard, the real problem went beyond his reputation. "Mr. Blackwell, we need an immediate action plan," said Marcus Wilson, a respected public relations expert, with a grave expression. "However, the issue is not just about image, it's about character. What you did was unacceptable." Richard felt the weight of those words. He was not used to being confronted in this way. The arrogance that had always accompanied him now seemed like a mask that was about to collapse. I didn't know who he was. I was just having a bad day," he tried to justify. "That is no excuse," replied Marcus bluntly. "You need to understand that your words have power. And when you use them to demean someone, you not only harm that person, but yourself as well." The conversation continued, but Richard felt increasingly detached. When the meeting finally ended, he left in a state of confusion. Marcus's words continued echoing in his mind. He decided that he needed to meet Stephen Curry, not to offer a superficial apology, but to understand the gravity of his actions. After several attempts, he managed to get Curry's contact through mutual acquaintances in the business world. To his surprise, Curry agreed to meet him. The chosen location was a discreet room in the Golden State Warriors Training Center, where the atmosphere was relaxing, yet Richard felt nervous and out of place. When he entered, Stephen was already waiting, wearing a friendly smile, yet a gaze that conveyed seriousness. "Thank you for coming, Richard," said Curry, extending his hand. Richard hesitated, but eventually shook it, feeling the contrast between the athlete's strength and the fragility of his own position. I don't know where to start," he began, his voice faltering. "Start by being honest," suggested Curry, with the calm that had always characterized him. "What do you truly feel about what happened?" Richard took a deep breath, a wave of shame washing over him. "I was wrong. I should not have spoken that way. And now I am facing the consequences. But what really troubles me is that I never thought this could happen. I never cared about how my words affect others." Curry listened patiently, without interrupting. This happens to many people in positions of power. But what defines you is how you act after a mistake. You can hide behind money or fame, or you can use it to do something positive. Richard felt his heart tighten. "I don't want to be that guy. I want to change, but I don't know how." "That is the first step," said Curry, with an encouraging smile. "Acknowledging that you need to change. You can start using your influence for something greater than yourself." The conversation deepened, and Richard began to understand the experiences that Curry shared. The athlete spoke about the challenges he had faced throughout his career, including discrimination and prejudice, even after achieving fame. "If you truly want to change, you have to do it through actions, not just words," said Curry. "There are many people who need support and inspiration. You can be a voice for them." When the conversation ended, Richard felt lighter, yet even more aware of his responsibility. As he left the training center, he looked toward the nearby playground where children were playing basketball with an improvised hoop. For the first time, he truly observed the scene, the joy, the camaraderie, and the daily struggle that many faced without the opportunities he had always enjoyed. That reflection accompanied him throughout the walk back to his hotel. Richard realized that true change began with the willingness to listen and learn, and that his journey was only just beginning. 6 months had passed since the incident that transformed Richard Blackwell's life. Now, he was at a newly inaugurated community center in one of the ETE most underprivileged neighborhoods of Oakland, surrounded by children and teenagers who were exploring the new facilities with enthusiasm. The center, equipped with basketball courts, technology labs, and classrooms, was the first in a series of projects that Richard had funded through the newly created Blackwell Foundation, with an initial investment of $50 million. Wearing a casual shirt and jeans, Richard was far removed from the image of the arrogant executive he used to be. He mingled among the youth, listening to their stories and interacting in a genuine manner. The center was not just a physical space, it was a real opportunity for change, both for him and for the community. During the inauguration ceremony, Richard prepared to give a speech. He looked at the assembled crowd, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. When he began to speak, his voice was firm yet full of emotion. Sometimes we need to fall in order to learn how to rise. What happened on the EHID plane was a turning point for me. My worst moment became my greatest opportunity for growth, he said, looking at the children surrounding him. Life is not about what you have, but about how much you can impact others. Enthusiastic applause echoed through the hall, and Richard felt encouraged. He continued by sharing his journey of self-reflection and his desire to make a difference in the lives of young people like those in front of him. I decided to step down as CEO of Pinnacle to devote myself entirely to this foundation. I want to help create opportunities and break down barriers. At the back of the hall, Stephen Curry observed with a satisfied smile. He knew that Richard's transformation was genuine, and his presence there symbolized the new partnership between them. When his turn came to speak, Curry shared his vision of the importance of investing in communities and the responsibility we all have to support those around us. When people make mistakes, we have two choices: to condemn them permanently, or to give them the opportunity to do better. What Richard is doing here is real and is changing lives, said Curry, pausing to look at Richard. He is showing that we can all learn and grow. After the speech, Richard interacted with the children as he watched them play basketball. He realized that even though he had no skill in the sport, the laughter and contagious energy around him made him feel part of something greater. A 14-year-old teenager who had benefited from the mentoring program pulled him aside. "Hey, do you want to play a game with us?" asked the boy with a sparkle in his eyes. Richard hesitated, but instead of refusing, he accepted the challenge. He joined the game, laughing and having fun as he tried to keep up with the young athletes. With every mistake and success, he felt more connected to the community, realizing that true wealth was not measured by his bank account, but by the lives he could impact. At the end of the day, as the sun set behind the buildings, Richard and Curry sat on one of the center's benches, watching the children play. "I never thought I would be here doing this," Richard confessed, feeling a wave of gratitude. Curry smiled. "Life is full of surprises. What matters is what you do with them." Richard looked toward the horizon, feeling that he was finally on the right path. He had learned a valuable lesson. Redemption is not just about repairing mistakes, but about creating a better future for those who need it most. The legacy he was building was not solely his own, but a collective effort that could change lives forever. And for the first time, he felt truly free.